You're on mute.
You can go ahead and give an initial welcome. And
okay, great.
Karen, if you want to start sharing your screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Right. Well, welcome everyone to the information session for the HomeHelpMN Community Connectors RFP. Just so folks are aware, we will be recording this meeting and it may be posted publicly. We will leave time at the end of the session for questions, and please mute your line unless you are speaking. And if you're muted, the webinar audio controls are orange as opposed to green. Also, please do not put a hold on your line because that may trigger music. So just some intro logistics. I know we're still trying to work out some logistics of this. We don't usually use GoTo for our internal meetings, so hang tight with us while we figure that out. There we go. And then just go over a few things as far as the GoTo technology for this. As I said, there'll be some time for questions and answers at the end. So there are two options for asking questions during the webinar. The toolbar on the upper right-hand side of the screen allows you to ask questions using the questions feature. And that'll be pulled up in a minute. And at any time during the webinar, you can type your question and click send. The questions will wait in a queue for us and we'll be able to answer them at the end. And then there's also a hand raising feature. When you click the hand icon, it's the same as raising your hand as if you were in an in-person audience. We can call on you verbally unmute, and then you can unmute your phone line so that you can speak to the panelists. Everyone will be able to hear the dialogue through the webinar audio. So we will call on folks as they raise their hands. You also have options for listening. And if you want to go forward a couple of slides, that would be great. And I can see just one more. There we go. So just one more back, sorry. There. So here's some like arrows kind of showing your bar options. So there's questions on the bottom and there's audio at the top. If you're listening via telephone, you can also unmute. It's the same as you are if you're dialing in through the internet. So there's mute, unmute buttons. Orange is muted, green is unmuted. I think I said that right. And then you can ask questions. Hopefully that was clear. I know we're kind of stumbling through this right now. Next slide, please. So today we'll quickly go through the guiding principles for HomeHelpMN, and we will talk through the program and really get into the Community Connector grant application, and then get into a little more of the nuts and bolts of the contract and reporting requirements, and then have time for questions. Next slide, please. Okay, so our mission at Minnesota Housing is, our core purpose is that housing is the foundation for success. We collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create and preserve and finance housing that is affordable. Next, we really want to emphasize the guiding principles for the HomeHelpMN program. One, that it's human-centered, so we really center our decision-making on the people most affected, using strategies, including empathy, trying to understand and be able to serve homeowners that might otherwise be left behind. We also are aiming to be anti-racist, so we use intentional race equity strategies in designing and delivering this program, and that's definitely a big part of our motivation for getting this RFP out there and getting community connectors to be a part of this program. We're really focused on mitigating homeowner displacement due to financial hardship, specifically associated with the coronavirus pandemic. We want to be straightforward, accountable, and have meaningful engagement. So, we want to make sure that we minimize stress, we make it transparent and approachable. We want to be timely. We need to be flexible, and to make sure that we can be accountable to homeowners and the public. And then again, another big reason why we're really excited about this RFP in particular is because we want there to be meaningful engagement with these communities that typically don't trust government services or don't have access to it. So we really want to make sure everyone knows, like, this is what the program is built on as a whole, and that definitely influences the rest of the work that we do.
Brittany, I just want to check quickly again, a few technical difficulties. Cheryl, are you able to join? If not, I can go in. Okay, I'll get started with the overview. So before we get into the RFP itself for the HomeHelpMN Community Connector RFP, we just wanted to give an overview of what the HomeHelpMN program is. So it is a fund that was established by the American Rescue Plan and provides federal funding to the states from the Treasury based on a formula. So as you can see here, $128 million for the state of Minnesota. And so the purpose of this is to mitigate housing-related financial hardships associated with the COVID-19 pandemic by resolving delinquencies related to mortgage or housing-related delinquencies, defaults, and also prevent disclosures and displacements. Again, the clock starts for those homeowners that began experiencing financial hardship after January 21st, 2021. So if there are hardships before then, unfortunately, this program would not apply. Next slide. So there's two components to Minnesota Housing's HomeHelpMN program. Again, has not launched yet, but here are a few pieces that will be a part of it. Is one, direct financial assistance to homeowners to address housing payments. And then the other significant piece are the housing counseling services to provide those counseling services to homeowners struggling with mortgage or homeownership related costs due to COVID-19 impacts. Next slide. So now we really wanted to get into the HomeHelp Community Connector RFP itself. As you can imagine, there was a lot of different elements that we were thinking about in designing this program. And in addition to marketing, counselors, and other partners, we really recognize that our trusted community partners are a really critical role in this program being a success. So really connecting the dots from, it's one thing to see an ad or a marketing piece. It's another thing to feel ready as a homeowner that's struggling to actually make the call to ask for help. So this is where the community connectors come in. They're really that link between homeowners that are struggling and the HomeHelpMN program. And we recognize how important trust is. We know that there is a fraught history around homeownership and some communities. And so the need to rebuild that trust again through those community partners. We also know that there's still some predatory actions out there and people don't know who to trust. And so for the community partners to really explain what this program is, build trust in the program, and really do that warm connection to create that safe environment for homeowners. Next slide. So we have up to $375,000 in awards as grants from these federal funds. The request amount can vary depending on what's proposed. Based on our estimation, we anticipate about 10 to 15 organizations will be selected depending on the size of the request. So the maximum grant amount is $60,000 for a 2-year grant term. And just noting, $25,000 in requested funds or over triggers financial documentation The application outlines what financial documentation we would need to receive. Requests of $50,000 and over triggers monitoring, which we'll touch on further down in the presentation. And the big thing here is we really ask that you request the funds that are needed to do the work that you would like to propose, rather than requesting the maximum funding amount. Because again, we may need to adjust award amounts, and it's just helpful to really know what's needed for the work. Next slide. So what is the role of the community connector? I touched on this previously, but really it's 4 elements. It's to inform, engage, and empower homeowners to access the program, to develop and implement a focused outreach plan to increase awareness for homeowners least likely to apply, to engage with homeowners and share information, and then provide homeowners the support they need to apply for and maintain participation in the HomeHelpMN program. And so just to be clear with this program, the connectors would not be providing actual application assistance or counseling, but we understand, completing applications, staying involved, it's a heavy lift for people that are in crisis. So being that kind of emotional support or just encouragement to stay in the program and try to help homeowners get the help that they need. Next slide. So who will be served by this program? So the program, the Community Connector program, and the overall program will be serving those that are at or below 100% of area median income. Area median income is basically the average income in a specific area. For example, in the Twin Cities metro area, it's around $100,000. In some smaller communities that have lower incomes, it's lower than that. And then the Treasury definition here, which is called socially disadvantaged individuals. The full definition is in the application itself, but it's really focusing on groups and communities that have been subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice, cultural bias, including Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, limited English speakers, residents of tribal lands, and certain census tracts. Next slide. So eligible applicants. So there's the entity status itself, but then also really what we're thinking about as far as strong qualified organizations. So eligible entities are nonprofit 501c3 community-based organizations. We do, and just to be clear, we do need that nonprofit status, and we recognize there's different types. There's neighborhood-based groups and organizations. There may be faith-based organizations, although the funding cannot support inherently religious activities. Any federally recognized tribal nation and tribal affiliated entities, for-profit and governmental entities are not eligible. So we're really looking for these qualifications with organizations that are able to demonstrate deep, longstanding, and trusting relationships in communities, that know how to disseminate information in the way that it's going to be well received by homeowners, to provide those culturally and linguistically relevant services and support, and the ability, again, as a state entity that has requirements, that they are able to comply with those requirements. Next slide. So for eligible uses of grant funds, there's a number of eligible uses. We anticipate that the majority will likely be program staff salaries for the time spent. We know that it's a person-heavy, people-powered kind of program, and so we anticipate seeing that. Expenses for the informational sessions. We know we're still in COVID times, and having that personal connection can be important. So, those PPE expenses. And then we'll get into this a little bit later, but really the administrative costs component. So for example, if there's technology expenses, we know a lot of, the switch to a lot of virtual pieces requires more technology that not everybody has. And then again, keeping in mind that 10% administrative cost limit of the total award. Next slide. So I just wanted to walk through the core responsibilities. These again are in the application, but significantly to be able to see that focused outreach plan and the activities that the applicant plans to do. And this is where we defer to your expertise. When you know your community members, maybe a larger info session would work for some. Maybe others really need a one-on-one meeting to talk about their struggles. Maybe there's a trusted small group that meets and that group support would be helpful. So this is where we really look to you to identify what would work best to reach the communities that you're connected to. Next slide. And then again, very significantly is that engagement and information sharing piece. Again, we look to applicants to identify what would work best, but at a very minimum, we'd want to see at least 5 engagement sessions just to inform community members about the program, address questions or concerns, just help people kind of think about how they can prepare for the process. Again, safety is important, so deferring to what feels appropriate for in-person on-site or connected remotely. And I'll touch on this in a bit, but we're working with a number of contractors, including marketing contractors. So we will have marketing and training materials designed that you can use and amplify that messaging through your networks. Next slide. And then another big piece, again, success is really also important to, coordination is really important to success. So coordinating closely with Minnesota Housing, the other contracted entities as appropriate. And then we do plan to host or hold regularly scheduled meetings with the community connectors. We know that that communication flow is really important. So can we answer questions? We know connectors will have some really important feedback to share about customer experience, continuous improvement. As with so many things, this is a new program for the agency, and so having that feedback loop is really important. And then also, getting some process improvement information. And then the other piece too is this model of funding community engagement and connection. We want to be able to evaluate it, and so your participation in that will be really important. Next slide. And then the final piece I wanted to highlight was around reporting and monitoring requirements. So as you're putting together your budgets to apply, just to give yourself some time to estimate what those, how much time that might be, and then what that might cost as far as staff time or other time. So we do need to track the impact of the grant program to comply with state and federal requirements. And then we'll also be requiring monthly reporting to make payments and track progress. So, we listed a few examples here. For entities that are selected for this program, we'll have a follow-up session and really get into some details around what this would look like. Next slide. Oh, can you go back a slide? So the next, just digging into the monitoring piece a little bit more. Again, there's some federal and state requirements that we need to dig into, and there are some pieces that we may review. So receipts and invoices, potentially sign-in sheets for community engagement sessions, other items as required. And for awards for over 50,000 and more, there's much more in-depth monitoring that we may need to see. Next slide. And so I wanted to highlight next, there's, in addition to the application questions itself, there's 2 attachments that, if selected, would be incorporated into the contract. So do make sure to take a look at the work plan template and complete it, and then save it with the applicant name and work plan. It's just important that we don't lose track of any of the attachments. So if it has your name, that make sure that we can track it. As I mentioned, it will become part of the grant contract, so do complete it with that in mind. And also that this is to span over a 2-year grant term. And as you're trying to identify how to fill it out, we're really looking for a description of each activity so that we can understand big picture what the main items of work will be, and that you list tasks that help us understand how each of those tasks will allow completion of the overall activities. Next slide. And the other budget attached, or the other attachment to the application, is the budget attachment. So there's 2 pieces. One is the budget narrative, and this is really the reasoning for why you're seeking to request the funding that you've identified. The budget template itself is an Excel spreadsheet. Make sure to complete the budget, save it as we're requesting, and note that the final budget is subject to approval by Minnesota Housing. And as I mentioned before, there's 2 major types of costs. One are program costs, and those, again, program staff time, other costs related to carrying out the program itself. and then administrative costs, which cannot be more than 10% of the overall funding request. So for example, if the ask was $50,000, the administrative costs would need to be capped at $5,000. So again, make sure to account for the time needed to do the reporting and administrative costs. And we do allow both direct and indirect. So direct costs could be technology expenses, et cetera. Indirect are just the overall facilities and organizational administration necessary for carrying it out. And then when you think about just printing costs and those types of details, we will cover the costs for copies and printing for materials of 50 or more, but printing and copying for 50 or less should be included in the applicant's budget. Next slide, please. So next, I wanted to walk through the application and submission. As Brittany mentioned.
I think I can take over these next few slides to give you a little break.
Thanks. Thanks, Brittany. And just as Brittany mentioned, we'll have time at the end for questions, but if there's something that comes up for the information I just reviewed, go ahead and just insert that into the chat. Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah,
I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so please let us know if you have questions like during the process. A complete application, what does that look like? So within the application, it'll have a budget, a work plan, and save with a naming convention so that we don't lose track. So have your name underscore, and then like, is it the budget or is it the work plan? So just naming them, so that's really easy for us to keep track of those things would be a huge help. Financial documents, if you're requesting $25,000 or more, you please look at the application because there are additional requirements for that, just additional information that we're going to need, and you'll submit those via the portal. You're going to need a copy of the Minnesota Secretary of State Certificate of Good Standing, and then a DUNS number. So these are all things that are required to be considered a complete application. Next slide, please. So what are we looking at? How are we scoring this, right? So the application will be scored in 4 areas. The first is the qualifications, experience, and capacity of the applicant, which we're weighting at 60%. So we're looking at applicants who have extensive community networks, a long-standing and trusting relationship with communities. So really like in the community and really understand the community. The next piece that we're looking at is communities most impacted and equity. So we're looking to see what strategies we use that are tailored to reach and maximize participation of the socially disadvantaged individuals group and communities most impacted, and those least likely to access the program, right? So what, who is the target community that you work with, and are they a part of that group? And then another piece that we're looking at, scope of work and outcomes, is having a clear plan that includes recommendations for engagement, approaches, activities, timelines, and then key partners. So just looking at like who you intend to work with, some of the plans. We mentioned a minimum of 5 engagement sessions, but what other strategies are you uniquely suited to use, or what other things you think would be effective? And again, we are really looking to you to tell us what makes sense for your communities too. So please make sure to include the information that you think is going to be relevant to that. And then the last thing we're looking at for 10% is budget. Next slide, please. So some other things that you should know is that applicants selected to move to the interview stage, which will also be scored, is considered a part of the overall selection. So it's not just the application, we will be having an interview. And the selections will not just be solely based on the application, it will be a holistic piece. And the review committee will evaluate the application scores in conjunction with the guiding principles of the HomeHelpMN program, which I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. And then also, each applicant's ability to address equity and community need, especially in the socially disadvantaged communities. And the size of the organization, the existing resources may be taken into account into the scoring process, but I, really want to emphasize we're really looking, the bulk of the points are going to qualifications, experience, capacity, and then those other, communities most impacted in scope of work. So these are just additional things for you to know. Next slide, please. All right, so what makes a strong application? And so we're looking for applicants that can clearly explain in detail that they have a long-standing trusted relationships with communities most struggling to pay their mortgage, that they have the ability to connect with individuals and communities with resources, and they already have an established ability to create a space where those in crisis feel safe and comfortable sharing that information and having a relationship. We also are looking for applicants to detail how they're able to target or tailor and present information so that it really is accessible and it resonates and encourages folks to access programs. And then, of course, your ability to do the work and a clear plan to carry it out. Again, we are deferring to applicants to elaborate on what makes sense for the community that you serve, what kind of outreach makes sense beyond just the 5 community engagement sessions that we're looking for. Next slide, please. So some things to keep in mind as you're going through the application. Make sure you give yourself enough time before it closes because you may realize you need more information or your answers just aren't quite ready or where you want them to be, and it's better to just give yourself more time. Also, this one's really important. Assume that the only information that we have about you from you is what you provide in the application. So please be detailed, be clear, and be direct. So that's the next thing, is directly answer the question and be clear and concise. And you don't have to reach the max word limit. So don't think you have to fill in all the space, but if you really have details and you really want to include them, please do. Because again, assume that the only information we have is what you're providing. Make sure that you review the application checklist, which is at the beginning of the application, and then make sure to pay attention to the submission requirements and the tip sheets. So this is just some helpful reminders to just keep in mind as you're filling it out. Next slide, please. All right, so how do you actually submit the application and when? So all the application, the attachments, and the financial documents are due on October 12th at 5 p.m. Please email the application, work plan, and budget to HomeHelpMN at state.mn.us. Sorry, I stumbled through that. And as we said, naming things, make sure you do so my name is Brittany, so Brittany Rice _ work plan, Brittany Rice _ budget. And that will just help us keep track of those things in the process. And then separately, you'll upload financial documents specifically for a request or $25,000 more. Submit them at the portal, which is minnesotahousing.leapfile.net. Select secure upload, and in the recipient email, use the email homeownership at state.mn.us. Then you'll hit start and follow directions there. So the financial documents need to be uploaded to the portal and not emailed to the Home Help email. So make sure that you get those documents to the right places. And if you need reasonable accommodation requests, you can apply. Please email Alyssa Whatsamore at HomeHelpMN at state.mn.us. So these are just helpful instructions to make sure that you get the documents to the right places. And again, just make sure you submit the financial documents to the portal. Next slide, please. And I'm gonna read through these, but Alyssa, please feel free to jump in if you feel that I'm missing something. So there are some federal and contractual requirements because that's where we're getting funding from. We are asking that you submit monthly budget updates and reports by required due dates. So we will have someone to remind folks, and we will tell you the due dates, but just know, have a heads up that you will have to provide budget updates. There needs to be a written conflict of interest policy, and you need to comply with affirmative action and non-discrimination requirements, and comply with applicable state and federal requirements and guidelines. And correct me if I'm wrong, these are like listed and linked somewhere in the application process. Next, sorry.
No, that's okay. But these would be things that we would go over for applicants that are selected. We would do an additional meeting to really explain all these pieces.
You want to take over? I feel like I'm going to stumble through a couple of these.
Sure, no problem. So again, some of the pieces we're flagging now, it's just more so that if you're selected as part of this grant project or program, that you're not caught off guard for some of the pieces. So just flagging, again, these are things that we would walk through with the selected groups, but that just to have a heads up that this is what to expect. Next slide. So language access, as hopefully many of us know, is really important. That any language that someone speaks to and needs to access this assistance, that they can get the assistance that they need. So again, it's both a core value of Minnesota Housing and also federally required that for homeowners speaking languages other than English, that they can have the access to the programs and services provided by the HomeHelpMN community connectors. So for those grantees that are selected, we will need to work with you to provide a plan and process to take reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access. There's several factors that are considered for the level of language access and assistance needed. You know, it really is organization specific, and may include things like translation and interpretation services, bilingual staff themselves, referrals as appropriate. It really is organization specific, but just know that we will want to see at least, we will want to see a certain level of language access as part of the plan for the services the applicant or grantees would provide. Next slide. Again, due diligence, that's the phase that occurs after we select grantees and before we sign the contract. So that's where we'll be potentially working on revising the budget, confirming the details in the work plan, filling out payment forms. DUNS number, I will go over that in a bit. There's all these different logistics. So just flagging that if you are selected, that there is this phase that involves some of these various steps and forms. Next slide. And then a DUNS number. So this word is, or term is new to me as well, and some of you as well. So it is a unique 9-digit identifier for the business. It may take 1 to 2 days. So if you do plan to apply, and you don't have a DUNS number, just make sure to complete this early on. Again, this is one of those things, if you wouldn't want to take the time filling out your application and then realize you don't have a DUNS number, and then you would be late for the submission, because we do need to see that number in the application itself. There's a field for it. Next slide. And then if you're a new state of Minnesota vendor, again, this does not need to be completed at the time of application. But if you're selected, again, just flagging, there's a few forms that would need to be completed to make sure you're set up for payment. So again, just not wanting to catch you off guard there. Next slide. So again, timeline. Just wanted to walk through a few pieces. Again, remember the application deadline. It's October 12th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Central. And that's the date that we need to receive the application. As you can see, today we're having the information webinar. We also will have a question and answer session on October 8th. And then finalist interviews, as we mentioned, the 2-part process. So a subset of applicants will be selected to participate in finalist interviews, and we'll reach out to schedule those. And then the ultimate application itself is on or after November 19th, 2021. Next slide. Okay, so that is our presentation. Wanted to thank you for joining us today. I would like to open it for questions. If you can, please just put the questions in the chat. We have a relatively large group and that tends to make it flow a little more smoothly. Just looking through the questions here, some are about the program itself, or the HomeHelpMN program itself. I think for now, I would like to maybe wait to answer those questions. I do see one of my colleagues that is the program manager on the call. Potentially, if they're able to answer, I'll see if that's a possibility. But for eligibility, I do see a question about eligibility. Can individuals apply for the grant? So 501c3, those are nonprofit organizations, are eligible to apply. So an individual is unable to apply. And then it's correct, the community connectors would not process the HomeHelpMN applications themselves or work with servicers around their mortgage. It really is the engagement, information sharing, and that warm connection for the homeowner. And then the other question is, would a church qualify for community connectors? So faith communities could potentially apply. If they are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, again, it just couldn't be used for direct religious services. Let's see, and then looking at a few more questions here.
Just elaborate on that, Alyssa. So a faith-based organization, if they are a 501c, or I don't know they can, if they're holding like engagement sessions and doing that information sharing, they absolutely can apply. It's just that the funds couldn't be used, for religious purposes. So just to like add additional clarification around that, like they can still do it.
Yes, thank you. I do see. Okay, I'm seeing a couple questions where it looks like some confusion. It sounds like some homeowners themselves were hoping to see how they could potentially access the program. Again, the program is not yet launched. I might, but I do see that my colleague Devin is on the call. Devin, if you can unmute yourself, I'll go ahead and read some of these questions to you about the program because I think it's helpful. You just want to chime in once you're on. Let me see here. Sorry, I think I inadvertently muted. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry, Devin.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Just read a couple of these questions. What does it mean by the connection to COVID-19? Is that the same as the one for RentHelpMN is one of the questions.
So to be eligible under the Treasury guidelines, the homeowner must have had a COVID-19 impact, and that must have happened on or after January 20th of 2020, or January 21st, I think, of 2020 is the precise date. And there are two ways that the Department of Treasury defines that. They define that as a material reduction in income. So there was some kind of an income change in the household that led to some kind of arrearage. It could be, and again, this program is eligible for people who are behind in their taxes, behind in a mortgage payment, homeowners association. There's kind of a number of different places you could have fallen behind if you had suffered a decline in income. So again, a material reduction of income would be one of the eligibility criteria for that COVID impact. The second, which is really, I think, notable and important to emphasize, is Treasury also defines that COVID impact to also be a material increase in living expenses. So if you have documented increases in your living expenses, either because your health insurance premiums went up because that could also be because you lost a job, or you had additional members of the household that you had to support who needed to reside with you for a period of time. And those living expenses went up, that could be another eligibility criteria. So it's really one of two: material reduction in income or material increase in living expenses after that COVID date in the Treasury guidelines.
Thank you so much, Devin. Going through the questions here. There's a question about timing. I don't think we have a time to when the home help program will be launched, but go.
Certainly a valid
you want to add?
question. Yeah, certainly a valid question. We know there's lots of interest and people that have suffered a COVID impact and are behind in a form of their home ownership payments. Obviously, this is top of mind. How quickly can we get the resources delivered? This program is unique because it does require Department of Treasury approval of our plan to distribute and allocate the funds. So we have submitted that plan to Treasury at the end of August. We are waiting to hear back and to have them approve our plan. And then we're also in the process of getting the program up and operational so that applications can get processed, pre-screening can happen and occur. So we are not at a point in time where the resources are imminently available, but we are working fast and furiously to get, while we're working with Treasury on our plan and the approval of our plan, we're working behind the scenes to get the infrastructure built out so that we are ready to begin assisting and supporting homeowners. In the interim, there are two really important things that we want to encourage you to do. The first is that we have a really incredible team and resources here in the state of foreclosure prevention providers. And those can be accessed through our statewide network through the Homeownership Center. That's the Homeownership Center of Minnesota. I'm just looking up their email real quickly as we go. Maybe someone could type it into the chat as I'm trying to make sure I direct you to the right resource. I think it's HOCMN.org. That's HOCMN.org. And directly on their front page of their website, there's a green button, Foreclosure Help. So we want to really make sure everyone knows there are resources and housing counselors and foreclosure specific counselors that can help support homeowners now and more immediately. The second key thing that we really would emphasize is stay and be in touch with your loan servicer. So if you are someone who has a mortgage, this program can also support people who might just be behind on their taxes, right? Who might own their homes outright. But if you have a mortgage and are behind on your mortgage, the loan servicer who's servicing your loan, we want you to stay in touch with them and to actively pursue those loss mitigation options that are available through the loan servicers. And if you need help and support in navigating that, that's where reaching out to a housing counselor or foreclosure counselor can really help. And that's a no-cost service provided through the Homeownership Center. So I think that's going to get put in the chat for everyone as well.
Thank you, Devin. I did place it in the chat. Great. Okay, so I see another question. Is this for vendors to distribute these funds to SDI, socially disadvantaged individuals? No, it's to provide engagement and information sharing, not the actual distribution of assistance. Another question, someone represents a collective that's working together to share language capacity. Could the cap apply to an application submitted on behalf of up to 13 organizations? So we don't allow sub-granting for these funds. The complexity of it was just too much. So we need to see the direct application for the organization that's doing the work. Another question about eligibility. So for those that are doing homeownership counseling, already, they would not be eligible for this grant. I realize now when we went through this that we talked about who's eligible, dig into as much who's not eligible. And so the application itself does identify that. So I can quick pull up the application here and just state ineligible entities are include ineligible applicants, are for-profit entities and organizations currently funded by Minnesota Housing through our homeownership capacity or home ownership education, counseling, and training program. So we have already SEPA contracts for that work, so we wouldn't be looking to fund through this particular program. Another question is, will renters be included in this outreach and information? So you may be aware there's a separate Minnesota housing program called RFP for renters, and we are funding organizations through that program to be able to provide that outreach and information. So this is really to focus on homeowners and again, including manufacturing homeowners. Then there's a question about what the funds will be distributed for, and then there's a few examples that are listed. And then save us some time, I won't go back in the presentation itself, but the two primary functions are direct financial assistance and then also housing counseling services. That may relate to some pieces around the mortgage itself. Evan, I bet you have the better terms for this. If you wanted to speak a little bit to what it means around the housing counseling services.
So we have, as part of setting up the infrastructure to accept pre-screening, intake, and applications for the HAF program for financial assistance, we anticipate hiring a vendor to help support a call center and our application processing component of the program infrastructure. And integrated into that process, our intent is to support housing counselors through that process so that homeowners who need more counseling support, and that can include support around understanding the loss mitigation process and strategies available to homeowners based on underlying loan product guidelines. It could include help in support with basic budgeting. It could include help and support in assembling all the documentation requirements, help and support in communicating with the loan servicer around workout strategies and loss mitigation options. Those are, I think, some good examples of ways that housing counselors can support that work. And so we're trying to develop an integrated system whereby once the program's up and operational, we can then support people with broader housing counseling support who are looking to apply for HAF financial assistance as well. But again, counseling support is available outside of the HAF program. It's available now to homeowners too for all of those similar types of things. And counselors can work with homeowners on developing an action plan and helping set up pathway forward based on kind of what options are available to homeowners. And these options are changing rapidly in terms of loss mitigation, in terms of what's available based on the underlying loan product that homeowners are in. So I know FHA is contemplating right now some additional provisions around loan modifications to help support homeowners that maybe need more of a reduction in that payment to keep that home affordable. So again, we want to leverage all of those resources to help support homeowners to be successful as best we can and maintain homeownership stability in our communities.
Thank you. I see a question here saying, you know, the organization is qualified, they have the nonprofit status, DUNS number, etc., but may need assistance to complete the application itself due to language. What assistance is available? So I will have to follow up with you on that. I don't believe we would be translating these applications, but I can look into that further. Feel free to send a follow-up email to HomeHelpMN at state.mn.us. I'll put that in the chat as well so that we can stay in touch about what assistance may be able to provide. And I see a couple more questions related to individuals themselves who are currently struggling or unable to pay their mortgages. Again, please do visit the Homeownership Center link at hocmn.org. There are foreclosure counselors that may be able to walk you through your options at this point. Okay, and I just saw a correction here. So language translation for pre-screening, intake, and application is the responsibility of the applicants themselves. Let's see, again,
just to elaborate on that too, Alyssa, if that's okay. So the community connectors really is looking to have some focused community engagement to get information out about the HomeHelpMN program. And so within that, we want to make sure there are different language translation services available to reach diverse populations and populations with other than English proficient languages. But once they are in the system and starting to move forward with actual home help applications, pre-screening, intake, and applications, language translation and support should be provided through that infrastructure.
Thanks, Devin. And then, let's see. So another question, I see we're almost out of time here. Will the community connectors get more specific information about the HomeHelpMN application and program logistics? Or will someone at HomeHelpMN work with the community connectors to provide that information? So the community connectors would have, we would provide them with some basic overview and information type documents about the program once the program is live. So we would talk and see what information, provide you with some information if you were selected. And then also give some baseline knowledge to the connectors just to be able to answer some questions about, about the program. And I do see a couple more personal or individual questions about individual housing struggles. Again, we do recommend reaching out for foreclosure prevention and counseling services at the Homeownership Center. And then another question about needing updates or repairs to a home. Through our single family division, we work with participating lenders to offer different loan products for emergency repairs and other types of repairs. So I would ask if one of my single family colleagues could send to me to put in the chat or send to the audience how someone who is in need of those kinds of loans or financial assistance could access it, would be very helpful. I'll take one more look through the questions here. Again, I see a question about how can you apply for the financial assistance. Again, the program has not yet launched, so we do encourage people to reach out to get for potential counseling services. Sorry, just looking through the questions one last time here. I believe I've answered everyone's questions. I'll just stay quiet for a moment here and see if there's anything else. Either if I accidentally missed your question, I do apologize, or I will go ahead and, or if you want to take a few more minutes and send me those questions. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and just find you the link at the website here. We do have a number of pieces related to home improvement, so I will put that link in the chat. It describes the types of products, loan products that we have, and how to find a lender that might offer those if you do need home repair assistance. Okay, and then there's a question about accommodations for people that may have disabilities or limitations. So when the funds are available, we do have a plan to provide reasonable accommodations. So information would be available once the program is launched. And there's a question about, is this work similar as RentHelpMN, where you'd upload clients' applications and documents? It's a different, Home Help is a very different program. And again, the connectors would not be uploading documents and submitting applications. So if an individual does have a disability, they can get an accommodation for their disability to be able to access the program. Just gonna wait and see if there's any final questions here. Well, I'll just reiterate or include in the chat the email if you have any further questions. Again, it's homehelpmn@state.mn.us. I'll go and send that here. Oops. And then so to all. Okay, I believe that's everything. I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. Please do stay tuned for any other information. We encourage people to sign up to our e-news just about general announcements for the program. And again, please do reach out via email if you have any questions. So again, we look forward to working with you, and I hope you have a great day. Take care. All right, thanks again. I'll go ahead and end the meeting.